Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rapping with the Rep. And I'm really excited because today I'm here with Robert Parris of BCAT.
Thank you, Ken, for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. Robert's come to you through BNEWS and other programming where you've won several awards. And today I'm hoping that you'll be nominated for Co-Host of the Year award for the work we're going to do here on Rapping with the Rep. You've been on Rapping with the Rep before when you came to the State House.
That was fun.
And we walked around and we talked to the folks there and saw what really goes on there, on the scenes, behind the scenes and all that. And today we're going to have a conversation about the legislative session, which is beginning now. It's began in January. Bill filing took place in January for 2 weeks, and then for 2 weeks after that, after we filed all our bills, and I filed probably 20, something like that. It's not really the quantity that counts, it's the quality, it's the kind of bills that we all file that's most important, because almost 4,000 really get filed, only a few hundred get passed into law. But we then take 2 weeks where we review other people's work and we decide whether we want to sign on to another representative or senator's bill, because we want to show leadership, we want to show the Senate President, we want to show the Speaker of the House that we agree that these particular bills, particular policies are good ideas. We came back off of some really important accomplishments statewide and for our area. And one accomplishment that we achieved just recently in the past month that I want to make sure all the folks at home know, because it will affect all of us here in Burlington and in Bedford and Wilmington, is that for years we've worked on a project with the Middlesex 3 and the Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce to bring workers from Lowell into Burlington who are otherwise unemployed to fill one of several hundred job openings in the restaurant industry here in Burlington. The restaurants are really complaining. They're upset because there are a lot of people here to eat at their restaurants, to dine there, but they don't have the staff to be able to service their needs. And that's a real challenge for them. And it's a struggle for them to stay in business. And so we identified a source of employment, which is the Lowell area. There's training there for people in that industry. And the challenge was through transportation to link them up. So for several years, we worked with the Department of Economic Development in the administration. That would be the Secretary, Jay Ash. And we worked with the Secretary of Transportation, Stephanie Pollock. And we eventually put together some money to help the businesses to get this off the ground. The businesses are willing to pay for it, but what they asked the state to do, together with the municipalities, Burlington is helping with this too. They said, just help us get it going. And the reason is that a lot of employees, when they hear that, well, I can get a job in Burlington, I can't otherwise get there, but you're telling me that there's a service I can use to get there, but where is this? It doesn't seem to exist yet, which was the case. So it's got to begin. Someone's got to begin it. And if we rely on just a few businesses to put up the money and do that, then those businesses are going to ask for all the seats. And we want to make sure that the big businesses, big and small, restaurants, big and small, can use this service. And that's what we did. So together with Senator Cindy Friedman, we put together 2 parts of the plan. We were able to hire a person, a manager, to manage this plan, a regional transportation coordinator. And then we have a 3-year plan where the state will pay most of the costs in the first year. The second year, it'll transition off to the businesses in the states with some municipal involvement as well. By the third year, it'll be very little public money, mostly private money. And by the fourth year, the businesses will have taken over, which is, I think, the way it should be, the way everyone hopes it would be. It's a way of getting workers in to Burlington without creating a lot of traffic, because these workers won't need their own car. They'll have these 33 passenger shuttles. So that was something we've been talking about for a while, and we finally got it funded. We turn it over now to the coordinator to get those shuttles onto the road and get these businesses staffed. And that was important.
Now, I know, Ken, some of your other accomplishments was the paid family and medical leave. So talk a little bit about that for me.
Right, and we had a few shows about that right here on Rapping with the Rep, and that was signed into law last summer by Governor Baker. That's a program that will allow every working person in Massachusetts to take time to be with their family at the times of greatest joy, which would be when a baby is born or adopted, and times of great stress, which is when a child is in the hospital, very sick. This would apply after a 5-day waiting period and only to very serious medical conditions. So we're not talking about a child home from school. This is when a child really needs that parent to be in the hospital with them, to hold their hand. And when you think about a parent that has to look at their child in the eye and say, I know you're frightened and I know you want to be here, and I'm frightened too because of the situation that we're facing, but I have to go back to work because I still have to pay the rent and I still need to pay the bills. This way, for a limited time, depending on the length of the illness, but for no more than 20 weeks, that parent will be able to get some wage replacement. And what that means is they don't get 100 cents on the dollar. They don't get their full salary while they're out. Depending on how much they make, they'll get some help to pay the bills. But for some time, they'll be able to be with their family member, be it a child, a spouse, a parent, an aging parent, and they don't have to make that tough choice. So I think that'll be a great help to them. Every country that's a member of the United Nations, except for 3, the United States, Suriname, and Papua New Guinea, have such a program nationally. We don't. We have it now in, I think, 5 states. We're one of them. And I think we've designed the most efficient and best program in the nation because it's one of the newest, us and the state of Washington. So that will go into effect beginning in 2022. It is funded half by employers and half by employees. Very small premium is going to be withheld from people's paychecks. The average is $3.40 total, which means half and half. So $1.60, $1.70, however the math works, for each per week. And for that very small contribution, our workers will have the security of knowing that they can be with their family during that time. For the birth of a child, it's up to 12 weeks, by the way, or adoption. And our businesses will know that when someone goes out on leave, this program will pay for their compensation so that they can pay someone else to take over those shifts. And they don't have to worry about, if they're a small business, they don't have to worry about losing that employee because they have to hire someone else new to get that work done.
Now, I know there's bills filed for this coming year and the coming year ahead, and I know 78-year representatives, the Comprehensive Child Care and Child Educational Bill. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but talk a little bit about that.
You did a little research on the website, I take it, Robert, huh? Yeah, so what we did is we filed, so now that that's done, we filed a bill. I think it addresses the next phase of a child's life, of a family's life with a child. And that is, okay, after 12 weeks, the working parent or both working parents, now they go back to work because their 12 weeks is up. And what happens, and it happens to many families, it happened to mine when my son was born 16 years ago. My wife went back to work, in our case it was my wife. What she earned per hour from her office work was just slightly more than our daycare costs. Our parents aren't local. We had nowhere to bring our son, so we had to pay someone. And the thousands of dollars that we paid per month just didn't make it worthwhile for her to go back to work and make just slightly more. So what this program is designed to do is look at the way that we make available childcare opportunities for people who are looking for them and take away the financial disincentive, or really the financial impossibility for so many people that need childcare for preschoolers, for someone before kindergarten. I have a friend, someone actually who worked with me years ago, who said that for 2 children, they're paying $4,000 a month. I mean, imagine how much you have to earn per year, pre-tax, to make that affordable. It's very difficult, and so it affects women more so than men. More often than not, it's women who are facing this choice. Many women don't want to leave the workforce. They know that once they leave the workforce for 3 or 4 years, when they go back, they're behind the 8 ball with respect to wages, with respect to promotions and things like that. And they really enjoy working. They want to go back. But they don't want to go back if they see that they're making so little money, and for that little money, they can't spend time with their newborn or their newly adopted child. So what we want to do is similar to paid family leave. We want to benefit the middle class families We want to benefit the working poor families. The less someone makes, the greater the benefit. Essentially, there'll be a subsidy. They'll pay for childcare, but the less they make, the higher the credit. The less they'll have to pay to do this. It'll take some time to perfect the plan, as it took some time. Paid family and medical leave took 4 years. If we could get that done in this time, I'll be pleased. I don't know, that was a pretty quick turnaround. But we've got a coalition of more than 50 groups, including business groups. And by the way, this bill is bipartisan. It's got the support of the Senate minority leader signed onto it, because businesses see the benefit in having available to them a place that their employees can bring their child during the workday so that they can return to work and they don't lose that valuable talent. So we're looking at this as a win-win situation with these coalitions from both the labor communities and the business communities to put together the best plan possible.
Now, another topic, I know Burlington there's along many highways, 95, Route 3, there's all a bunch of stuff. So I know you're trying to get involved with noise barriers along those highways.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, noise barriers have been a problem for years too. And one of the issues is that there was a study put together back in the 60s that created a list of the locations. They're called Type 2 noise barriers. Type 2 are these are the places that would be erected where the problem already exists, as opposed to when a new highway goes up. A Type 1 barrier would be built when the road is built. Well, we're talking about Route 128 is built. And there are many houses in Burlington and in Woburn, specifically in Bedford's up Route 3 somewhat. But it's 128 that has been widened after many people bought their houses. And especially this time of year in the winter when the leaves are down, the highway is really right in someone's backyard, and it's very noisy. And so what I did was together with the new representative from Woburn, Representative Haggerty, we filed a bill that will create a revised study to show, through the science that we now have, which is so much different than what was available to them 50 years ago, to show where the need is most severe. And once we have that study so that we'll know who rises to the top, then we can approach the federal government for funding for noise barriers.
Now, another one is the senior property tax deferral. I know 10 of your other state representatives were talking a little about that. So tell me a little bit about that and what's going on with it.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. That's another bipartisan measure that I filed, and it's actually something that came up during the governor's campaign, and Governor Baker brought it up in principle. And so we're actually working with his office on tailoring the best program to do this. And what it is that seniors over the age of 65 currently have the opportunity in Massachusetts, if the municipality joins in the program, to defer their property taxes until the property is conveyed. Most seniors will convey their property when they go to a nursing home or when they pass away. And their property taxes often are some of the most expensive, of their expenses. That's the biggest one that they have. Some people are paying $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 a year in real estate property tax. And so what this does is allows them to defer all or part of it until the property is conveyed. A lien is put on the property so that once the property is conveyed, the municipality is paid back. The problem with the statute as it exists is that it provides that if a municipality wants to do it, they can require that the maximum income that the senior has is $20,000 or less. Well, $20,000 isn't very much money. It's just barely more than Social Security. So most people have, especially people in our area, will have income of that level. So if that's the number, it doesn't leave anybody it doesn't leave that program available to just about anybody. And you can raise it to $40,000, which is still not that high. So what I want to do is raise the numbers. The 20 goes to 40, the 40 goes to 80. But more important than that, what I want to see is, this is sort of the home run of this bill, is I want to see the state take it over. So currently what will happen is that the municipality will say, okay, you can defer. They can charge interest. The interest can be up to 8%, but most municipalities will charge 1 or 2%, just a handling charge on it. And they'll say, okay, we'll wait for our money. We know we'll get it. There's got to be enough equity in the property for this to work. And you can keep your money in your checking account and use it to pay your expenses. And eventually the property is sold. And yes, the criticism is that when the property is conveyed, usually it's to children, let's say it is, whoever the will leaves it to, but let's say it's to children. The child says, well, I got the house that I grew up in, but now there's a $20,000 lien on the house. And my answer to that is, well, that's true, but your parents saved $20,000 while they were alive that they didn't have to use. So there's a benefit for them for that, so okay. I think it would be easier for the state to do this. Just the more people in the state, the more taxpayers in the state would make it easier for the state to absorb a program where every year there'd be some properties being deferred, so they would reimburse the towns for the real estate deferral for waiting for the taxes to be paid. So they would essentially the state would manage the program, and it would really be revenue neutral, cost neutral, which is, if the interest rate was very low, just to pay the expenses of the people who had to work to do it, it would mean that in the end, no money was coming out of the state budget, no money was going into the state budget because what was going in was coming out. And that's what we're working toward doing. I think that would help seniors.
All right. Now let's switch gears for a minute and talk a little about healthcare. I know you're working on the urgent care access for Mass Health enrollees. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, on our last Rapping with the Rep, actually we had Jeff Roy, the vice chair of healthcare, who was on the conference committee, and we came pretty close to passing some comprehensive financial health care in Massachusetts. And I'm pretty confident we're going to do it again this year. And one of the issues that we talked about was one that really was centered around businesses here in Burlington and in Bedford, which is the urgent care. We have urgent care facilities. I think there are 3 or 4 of them here in Burlington. And the owner of one of them came to me and said, here's the problem. And there was an article in the Boston Globe about it too. They said that urgent care facilities across the state aren't used by Mass Health recipients to the same extent as they go other places. And if they're not used, if urgent care doesn't take Mass Health people, they're going to go to the emergency rooms, and that's very expensive, and that costs the taxpayers ultimately a lot of money, drives up the costs. And the reason that happens, and it does happen, the reason is that Massachusetts law currently requires that if you're on Mass Health, you have to provide a referral from a primary care physician. For a primary care physician to give you the referral, you had to have seen that person, that doctor, within the last 3 years. And a lot of people on Mass Health don't get a checkup every year. And so when they need to be seen because they're sick, they go to an urgent care. They can't give them this referral. There's no doctor that will give this to them, and so they get turned away. That's not right. And so the bill that I filed that has some pretty good support says we need to get rid of that law and allow Mass Health people to use urgent care, which is much less expensive than an emergency room, just like everybody else can. And hopefully that will be part of the comprehensive healthcare finance package that we end up passing this year.
So I know 60 other your state representatives were part of the higher education transparency. Right. So let's talk a little about that.
Yeah, so in the paper, even recently now, but we've seen colleges that have closed in the last year or have threatened to close or merge with other schools, and our students, including students from Burlington, have been affected by that. I mean, imagine if you've paid your tuition all along, you're in your last year at that college, and all of a sudden you're told, sorry, but we're not open anymore. And there may be a place that you can transfer that has the same program for you, but there may not be such a place. And it may be that the place you can transfer is the place you didn't want to go to in the first place when you came here. And our students, and in some cases their parents, don't have enough information available to be able to make the decision as to, am I sending my child, my teenager, or from the point of view of the student, am I going to a place that's solvent enough that I know that 4 years from now, or even 2 years from now, they'll still be there to give me that degree. And so what this bill does, and like you said, I think I had 60 bipartisan support, 60 representatives and senators say, you know what we do? We have the right to know if you receive public financing at all in Massachusetts and your higher education institution, let's publish what's your endowment, what do you pay your professors, what's the percentage of what you take in that goes to paying those professors. We should have a full financial disclosure done every year so that we know that these are solvent institutions, that their professors and adjunct professors and instructors are paid in proportion to what the tuition is, what you would expect they would be paid, so that we can have that level of confidence and we're not surprised by schools being closed.
Now, I know another issue that you're trying to get on topic is the school foundation budget.
Yeah, that's a problem statewide, and it's really received a lot of attention. And the issue is that, again, going back into the 60s, that was the last time that we had a commission set up to determine how we fund schools in this state. For the most part, our schools are funded by the municipality, the towns and the cities. That's kind of the way that historically it's worked. Here in Burlington and in Bedford, we fund about 93% of the costs of our schools. The towns do through our property tax. But what happens in places like Brockton and Lawrence, what we call our gateway communities, New Bedford, Fall River, their property taxes would not be able to fund the education of their students, because if they did, then you'd be seeing that the student in Burlington has maybe $12,000 or $13,000 or $14,000 per student being expended for their education, while in Brockton it might be $7,000, and that wouldn't be fair at all. So there was a formula put in place in the 60s that had the state budget subsidizing the educational costs of those of students from those communities, those cities mostly. But in addition to that, there are additional expenses that are incurred when students need to have help because English is their second language, or because they have special needs, special learning needs in school. And so those are different categories of expenses that are incurred. And so we recently had a foundation commission issue a report a few years ago, and they have recommendations on their budget to increase state contribution for special needs kids, for English language learners, for healthcare costs for staff. And we've struggled with the Senate. We've had different ideas. We both want to get these funded. We've struggled trying to figure out how much money it will take to do that and where we'll get the money to do that. The governor has his own idea as well. The governor's put out a proposal. It will require the municipalities to pay a little more. Maybe that's the right way, maybe it's not, but we'll get together with the best idea.
Now, another thing that's on the rise is the healthcare cost.
Yeah, so we talked about that. We're going to be continuing to work on a comprehensive bill, that's going to look at essentially the benefit that we have to keep people healthy, as opposed to people who have a cough like me. Because the least expensive way of treating people in this Commonwealth is to have them come to get their annual physicals when they're healthy, give them advice on staying healthy, preventative medicine. The most expensive way to treat people is people don't go to the doctor. They go to the emergency room. And then while at the emergency room, if we find out they've got something that could have been treated, and now there's expensive testing that is incurred and expensive treatment that they need, that's not the best way to be treating. So we will, we'll get together with the Senate again with a little more time and try to work out a compromise that we bring to the governor and address our rising healthcare costs. Our employers have a huge problem dealing with the cost of healthcare premiums, and we've got to get a better handle on that. So this urgent care piece will be part of that.
Now, there's something big going on in this country right now, and it's the opioid addiction. Opioid stuff's
Thank you for bringing that up. And what's just bringing it down locally, our criminal justice system, including right here in Middlesex County, is the biggest provider of drug substance abuse treatment in the Commonwealth. In fact, our prisons nationally are usually the places where more people are treated for drug and alcohol and substance abuse anywhere, because that's where people end up. Part of our criminal justice reform package that we just did set up a commission. It was really through the work of Senator Cindy Friedman, our senator, who's been working on this matter for years. And I'm fortunate enough to have been appointed as the House representative to this commission. And what we're doing is we're going to be making recommendations in the next few months to the Commonwealth for a pilot here in Middlesex County. And that pilot will be a diversion place, what's called a restoration center, where people can be taken if someone calls the police and says, well, there's someone here. They're not otherwise really committing a crime. They may be homeless. They may be, what might be called loitering. Maybe that's a crime, but it's really, it's sort of it's a crime of having nowhere else to be. And it may be a crime that comes out of drug and alcohol abuse issues. And so it would give the police the option of taking that person to a center that's specifically designed to handle detox and then treatment and then restoration, caring after that person so that they can get out of that cycle, because we have so many people that are in the cycle of being involved in the criminal justice system over and over again just because of drug and alcohol issues. I know you brought up opiates, and we can talk about that in a minute. But these, and opiate addiction comes into that as well. And so I'm really excited to be able to bring to this county the opportunity to have people put on the road to get better, rather than to stay in this sort of a circular track of you're just going to come right back again. Your problems are going to persist because we kind of store you somewhere and don't really look at how our society is better off if people who are involved in the law, in the criminal justice system, only because they're looking for ways to get out of their drug dependency issues. The opioid crisis, as you say, is we've got to continue to deal with that. We know that the problem is many people get into these opiate addiction situations not because they ever intended to experiment with drugs, as classically we've thought people who are addicted to drugs get into. These are people who start taking drugs as a result of injuries, surgeries, and many people, just like with alcohol, they're particularly susceptible to addiction to OxyContin or other of these opiates, and they can't get off. And one thing leads to another, and then they become dependent on that whole class of drugs. So through education, through restrictions, we passed one important bill that we passed that I was involved with. It sounds simple, but it's so important, is it allows someone who has prescribed an opiate after surgery to get a partial prescription. It's been great talking to you about what we did in the last session, a few of the things, and what we intend to do in the session coming up in the legislature. And I'm excited to have more of these Rapping with the Rep shows, and we can have more discussions with you, Robert. This was fun. I hope I let you get a word in edgewise.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, and thank you very much again, Ken.
All right, Robert, thank you.
Much.
Thank you, everybody. Tune in next time for our next episode of Rapping with the Rep.